What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're going to be showing you hitboxes in the form of Hurtboxes today. So if you don't know what a Hurtbox is, it's essentially the area of a player that can actually take damage. So up to this point, we've kind of been doing, admittedly, a bit of janky collision testing and a bit of weird hitboxes. So the way we create hitboxes and all that is pretty sound. I'm happy with it. I think it's solid, and it's what we used in Fury Strike. So I'm not upset with that. One thing that I've wanted to do kind of since the beginning, but it was a lot of work, so I had to get the foundation set up to actually make it happen. And as you know, I like doing these things in one episode. So, you know, it was kind of hard to get to the point where we could make it happen. But anyway, what we're going to be doing is essentially just not refactoring the hitboxes at all, but adding some functionality for Hurtboxes, and then also differentiating between player 1 and player 2. That is critical because that is what we can use to actually do this. And the reason that I haven't done it this way to begin with is because differentiating between player 1 and player 2 when dynamically spawning the characters, meaning you can pick your different characters and there's going to be different stages and things like that, is not as easy as one would think. So it's not hard, but it is a little bit more work than most people expect, and definitely a lot more work than I expected when I initially did it. Okay, so let's just get into it, as we always do. There's only going to be one code change today, or code addition, because the majority of what we're doing today is working with the hitboxes. This video is going to be intended to finish off the hitboxes for this game. We might do projectiles, which will have their own types of hitboxes or something like that. But in terms of actual hitbox behavior, I want to be done after this episode. I want to have it so that you could go on making your game however you want to make it, and after this point you'll be pretty solid with it. Okay, so the only thing we're going to do is I do want to add a Hurtbox variable to your default character. Again, this is going to be your project name, which mine is fighter template, and then character.h. So the reason we're adding a Hurtbox specifically as a variable is because I want to be able to set the Hurtbox in Blueprint. And it's better to always have a variable in code that you end up setting in Blueprint than accessing some sort of actor or object from Blueprint in the code. When possible, it's better to do that. Simply because the long and short of it, basically, if you're accessing something from code in Blueprint, the code can continue if the Blueprint fails. If it's the other way around, the Blueprint will not continue if the code fails. Does that make sense? So that could be very bad, obviously, if that's the case. So anyway, what we're going to be doing is adding this Hurtbox variable right here. So if you just do a actor pointer, which is this little asterisk, with of course the regular U property, edit anywhere, blueprint, read write, category, player references. I'm actually going to change this to hitbox right now. Hitbox. And then make sure you do your build and compile. So another thing you should do, there we go, just want to make sure that it built properly, because sometimes when you have the editor open, it does not like to build, is make sure you set the Hurtbox to null pointer in your constructor in the CPP file. It's always just a good thing to do. It'll help you when you're spawning, despawning characters, things like that. We're going to do cleanup of pointers and things like that in another episode, so don't worry too much about it for now. I just want to get you started on making your Hurtbox, setting it to null pointer. Okay, so that's all we're doing in the code for today, which is pretty simple, right? Now, at this point in the episode, I will say, if you have not looked at the other hitbox episodes that I've done, you're going to want to do that. Unless you have hitboxes of your own that already function, there's going to be a lot here that relies on what we've been doing already in the past that you're going to definitely want to look at the hitbox episodes so that you can understand everything that's going on in here. Because this is not a small amount of blueprint logic going on. Okay, so I will link them. You'll see them in the top right in the iCards. They should have both popped up. You can go to either of them, the dynamic creation or the damage being caused from the hitboxes, like the actual collision. If you don't need to do that, then great, but that is very important because I'm going to be going off of that logic. I try and differentiate these videos as much as possible, but sometimes for things like this, you need to go back and add things. So anyway, if you watch these tutorials, you'll know exactly how we're doing our hitboxes, how we do anim notifies to actually spawn them and delete them, how we are using the different types from the enum for proximity and strike, and how we spawn them at a specific location, give their damage, and then determine if we should destroy them or not once they're done. The only thing we're adding today, don't worry, we're not going to change this too much, we are going to try to get the pawn owner and set the owner of the hitbox. So I'll go into this more in a second, but the reason we're doing this right here and adding this is because we want to differentiate between player 1 and player 2. Remember, before we were doing it where it's just like, oh, if it hits a hitbox and that's player character 0, that does damage. Now the reason I did that is because that shows the collision. And we didn't have player 1 and player 2. But now we actually want to make it so you can damage your enemy, you don't damage yourself, no weirdness going on, right? So what we're going to do is, if you were watching, I can't remember what episode this was for, to be honest. It was probably the character select one, but regardless, whether you watched it or not, make sure you go into your fighter template game mode .h and make sure you have these two variables, player 1 and player 2. They're just your default character pointer, but for player 1 and player 2. We want to have these because we want to, again, differentiate between player 1 and player 2. So we want to know which player is attacking what other player. We don't want our own hitboxes to hurt ourselves, unless, of course, that's the functionality for that attack, like if it's a bomb or something. But we want to make sure that they are separate. So player 1 and player 2, that's all you need, right? You just make them null pointer in the constructor. Which I should have done, I just realized I did not do, so just caught myself on that. But I'm not going to change it for now because I got to rebuild it and everything. But you should probably set these to null pointer. I'm breaking my own rules here, so definitely go ahead and do that. Anyway, so yeah, here's player 1, player 2. Just make sure you have them, make sure they can be seen in Blueprint. Okay? Oh, I remember, it was definitely for the spawning episode. I will link that in an iCard right here too, because the spawning episode handled when we set the player 1 and player 2, when we were spawning them at different spawn points. So this is when we set them. I haven't possessed player 2 simply for the reason that I don't have 2 controllers, so it's just a pawn sitting there right now, so that is intended and not a mistake. But since these are now differentiated, that's great. We can use that in the hitbox logic to actually determine if the player should lose health or not. And we can also use that to determine if they're hitting a hurt box that's not their own. Okay, so let's get back to it. So here's the actual logic for the hitbox. It's all the stuff we've already done, but in the attack started anim notify and the attack active anim notify, you want to make sure after spawning the actor, you try and get the pawn owner, which is essentially the owner of this anim BP instance, which is the mutant character BP. So it's going to be your character blueprint or your character code class. But your character blueprint is going to derive from your mutant character class, which means essentially your anim BP is a child of your character BP. Essentially, I won't say it's a child actually, because it's a totally different type of blueprint, but your anim BP relies on your character BP, which is then a child of your code class, okay? So what we need to do is get the owner, which is this, and set the owner to be, set the owner of the hitbox to be this. I wanted to zoom in so you can see it, because I know the lines are a little close here. But basically what we want to do is take the hitbox, set its owner to the pawn owner, which is the character. And the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on that is because I want to make sure that it's done correctly for you. Because if we don't do this part, if we don't set the owner here, then we won't be able to determine if it's player 1 or player 2. in which case we won't be able to actually see the damage taking effect. So make sure after you spawn the hitbox, you set the owner of the hitbox to the pawn owner of the animation blueprint. Okay? Do that for both the proximity and the active, because we'll use the proximity attacks for blocking and things like that. So you'll still want to do that for both. You don't have to do anything for attack ended. You could, you don't need to, at least for now. Okay? Alright. Now, we do want some changes in the character BP as well. So the character BP is this one. My mutant character blueprint, which is just my blueprint class. Okay? So you should have this because this is where we set the... trying to figure out if it's in... I think it's in class settings, right? Oh yeah, it's just this right here. This is where we set the parent class. This is what we derived from so that we can actually have the mesh here. So that we can see that we're using the animation blueprint and we can see that we're using the skeletal mesh of the mutant. So if you remember setting up the mutant character or any other characters that you set up on your own, this is what this is doing. This is what blueprint we're in. Okay, so this blueprint didn't have any functionality before because we didn't need it to. I decided to add the Hurtbox to the character in this part because I think it's important that when the character spawns and when the blueprint renders, or when the blueprint spawns the model and uses the anim BP, it should have the Hurtbox by that point. Basically allowing it to show up instantly. Okay, so all we're going to do here, it's not a ton, but we're going to go to the event graph because you probably never opened the event graph on that, so there'll be a little message that's like, there's nothing in the event graph, would you like to open it anyway, right? Would you like to open the full blueprint graph? And then you hit yes, and then you'll come to this where you'll have event begin play, which is empty, and then these two which are empty. In begin play, because we only want to do it once, we want to go ahead and get the pawn owner. This is different from try get pawn owner because that's only done for animation blueprints. From the character blueprint itself, we can actually just character movement get pawn owner, and then get actor transform because we want to spawn the Hurtbox over top of the character, right? We want to spawn the Hurtbox right over top of the character. We will define its size, but we want to make sure that it's following the character along. So spawn it at the character's location. So go ahead and do spawn actor from class. Go here, select your Hurtbox class, which we're going to make. If you haven't made it, go ahead and make it now. So we'll do this, I'll show you. Hurtbox, all I did, there's nothing in here, okay? So you just have to go to wherever you want to make it. Blueprints, for me, it's functional BPs. Just go ahead and do blueprint class right here. Okay? When you go into it, you don't need to put anything inside the actual event graph. You just need to have it here, and you need to make sure it's something that can be seen. So you can go ahead and add a component. I called mine hitbox display, and all I did was literally add a cube, just like we did for the other hitboxes. Okay, and then I just gave it a green material, or any material you have. You can use any of the ones that are default, whatever you want. And then you can change its size. That's so the Hurtbox actually can be seen and can actually be used for collision purposes. That's what we're doing there. So now that you have this made, and sorry, I should have said that before, but now that you have the Hurtbox made, when you do spawn actor in your character blueprint, go to the class, find your Hurtbox actor, or your Hurtbox blueprint class, and just select it, and then add the transform of your player, of your character, I should say, to the spawn transform here, and you will have essentially spawned the Hurtbox over top of the character, over top of the mutant in our case. Did not mean to open that, my bad. Okay, so now that you've done that, you have your Hurtbox in place. All you want to do is make sure that you attach it to the actor and set the Hurtbox in the character class as well. And I'll show you why. If you don't attach it to the actor, when we play the game, you'll see that the Hurtboxes did spawn in the right spot. They spawned over top of the character, but they no longer follow the character around. Okay? So attaching to the actor will do that. So what this part is, take the Hurtbox that we just spawned, set it as the Hurtbox from the character. Okay? Well, since we're in the character blueprint, this has access to all the variables we have in code that are blueprint read write. So just go ahead and set Hurtbox to this. That way, if you ever access the Hurtbox in code or access it somewhere else from the character in blueprint, it will be referencing this actor that we just spawned. We're going to use that to determine the collision, so that's why this is important. Okay? And then just go ahead and attach to actor. It's literally attached to actor right here. And then you can type in self if you want. Self is usually used. Self just means this instance that I'm in. So I'm in mutant character BP. So I want mutant character BP to be the parent actor. And I also want it to set the new owner as the mutant character BP. The reason you use this is because sometimes Unreal has an issue if you leave something empty. Theoretically, leaving this empty is fine. This will go to self. However, it can cause issues simply because, first of all, some nodes aren't set up to work like that, so they literally have to be filled out. They won't just work off of self. And second, it's kind of explicitly telling you, oh yeah, I'm referencing this blueprint class. It's important, especially if you have multiple people working on a project. They might look at this being empty and be like, oh, why was that not filled out? So you put self in here to just basically say, yeah, this is what I intended to do this. This is why this is not filled out. So it's just like a little, it's more for keeping it tidy and making it easy to read than it is actually functional. But you can go ahead and add self to the parent actor and the set owner. So we're setting the owner of the Hurtbox, if you see. There we go. You can see the line that gets highlighted. We're setting the owner of the Hurtbox we spawned to be self, which is this class. So the mutant character BP owns the Hurtbox we just spawned. Right? That makes sense. Make sure for the attached to actor that in the location rule, rotation rule, and scale rule, you snap the target. Snap the target just means it will move with it. If you keep relative, keep world, they won't work, or at least I don't believe they will work. We can actually try it as an experiment together. Ready? Let's see. Yep, so I'm not even sure where it went. It probably spawned at some default relative position that we don't know, right? So snap the target. You just want to keep it over top of your target, and the target in this case is literally the Hurtbox that we just spawned, right? So you just literally want to keep the Hurtbox over top of the character. I think that makes sense. Okay. All right, now we're going to go to the last step here, which is actually making sure that when the collision between a hitbox and a Hurtbox occurs, that damage is dealt. So, again, if you've been following the hitbox tutorials, then you will know we've already done this part of it, which is where we did the spawn hitbox function. This comes from the animation blueprint and calls a function called check collision. And then check collision was looking if player character 0 was overlapping the actor, and if they were overlapping the actor, just cause that character to take damage. Now, that was fine. That was a valid collision check, and it's good. But it doesn't help us determine if it's player 1 or player 2. We don't want to be damaging ourselves if our Hurtbox hits our hitbox just because they happen to overlap, right? That's kind of stupid. And also, not only is it kind of stupid, but it doesn't help when you have player character 1, right? That only works for player character 0, which is also pretty stupid, especially for a fighting game which is intended to be for 2 players. So, what we want to do is just a little bit of logic to differentiate between them. So the main thing is here, we'll just go through the whole function since it's changed quite a bit. So in check collision, I made a function called determine player. So determine player gets your game mode. I happen to make a variable called base game mode reference, which is literally just my base, or excuse me, it's my, if I could type, that would be good. Fighter template game mode object reference. I accidentally clicked. I was trying to show you. There we go. Object reference right here. That's what this is. You don't have to do this. It's better, at least the way I've been taught and the way I've been using Unreal for a long time, is it's better if you're going to have to access something or cast something multiple times, such as your character class, your game mode, your game instance. It's better to make a variable in that blueprint. That way you can just access the variable. So I'm going to use the base game mode outside of the function. So I went ahead and just set it, so I didn't have to do get game mode and cast to fighter template game mode every time. It's also a little bit cleaner. You don't have to do this step, but I would recommend it, honestly. So go ahead and cast to your game mode. Set your variable. That is literally just your game mode. It's just holding this value. Here's the important part. Snag player 1, which we made in the game mode in the code. That was this. Check if it's equal to the owner. Remember, we set the owner of this is the Hurtbox, okay? Or this is the hitbox, excuse me. This is the hitbox that is being spawned when someone uses an attack. So we know the owner is set now in the animation blueprint right here. That's what we did earlier in the episode. Okay? So check if the owner of this hitbox is equal to player 1. If they are equal, then this is player 1. Else this is player 2. Now, if you did want a fighting game in this style that had more than one fighter, which it would be hard to work in because of the fact that it's, you know, intended to be more of like a Killer Instinct, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat game. But if you did want to do that, you could still use this functionality and make it work. But you would need to do some more logic here. This would be the difference. You wouldn't want a Boolean that would determine your player. You would actually just want to keep an object that was your player, like player 1 or ninja or mutant or whatever. That way it's not just a Boolean. That way you can have more than 2 possibilities here, okay? But assuming you're following this for the guide of like Street Fighter, Killer Instinct, whatever, then what you're going to want to do is if the player is the owner of this hitbox, or excuse me, if player 1 is the owner of this hitbox, then this is player 1. Player 1 is the one that launched this attack, right? So then we go into, and you see I made, so to make a new function you hit this plus, and then when you've selected your function, you can go to your outputs and hit plus to add a return value. So you can hit this button. I made a Boolean is player 1. And that's what this is. This is just a return node. Okay? Then from that return node is player 1. You go into a branch. This is just an if statement. Okay? So if it is player 1, then we want to check player 2's Hurtbox for the overlapping actor. If it's not player 1, meaning it's player 2, we want to check player 1's Hurtbox as the overlapping actor. So you could actually remove this Hurtbox and do a straight collision against the character itself, okay? And what I mean by that, if you don't want to do a Hurtbox like a square like I'm using, you could still do this and just go against player 2 and it'll still work. And you can tell that if I make this like 10, we have huge Hurtboxes now, right? But if I hit the enemy's Hurtbox, it doesn't do anything. I have to actually hit the player. You may want this, so I wanted to point that out. And I'll actually, because I think it's important, I'll give you a better example. That was a little bit too big. Okay, so see how the Hurtbox clearly extends past the character. But I am hitting his Hurtbox, but it's not doing any damage. I have to actually hit the character to do damage. Like I said, you might want that, so I think 1.1 is potentially what I wanted. Is that the standard? Yes, this is the standard. Cool. So you might want that, okay? However, I wanted to do it with Hurtboxes because Hurtboxes you have more control over. You can have meshes that are crazy and, you know, have like 30,000 vertices if you wanted, and then do a collision check on just a square, which is much easier for the game to handle, first of all, and also it can be cleaner. It can be used for balancing purposes. If you have different outfits or skins for a character, and their skins might have a helmet and the other doesn't, but you want his hitbox to always stay the same, then you want to use a Hurtbox. Again, it's up to you, but that's what I'm doing. That's why we did the whole Hurtbox thing. Okay, and then the rest is just the same as it was before for check collision. So if it is overlapping the actor, then go into a branch and just, if it's true, go ahead and take damage. The damage will now be done on the target. This is also different. So it's not just damaging character 1 like it was in the past. Here it's actually taking damage from the Hurtbox that we're checking, right? So player 2 was the Hurtbox we were checking, so we're going to take damage on player 2. Otherwise, if we're player 2, or if player 2 is hitting us, then player 1 is the Hurtbox we're checking, so we take damage on player 1. Okay, now that was a lot, admittedly. Don't believe I forgot anything. Just make sure, and it's important to note, remember, you don't ever need to use this function. You could technically just do this in the event graph. I thought it was a lot neater to use the function, which is why I did it. There's nothing in the Hurtbox actor. You can, if you want to be able to see him, that is something I should mention. He is invisible by default when you make a new blueprint class and add a component. Click on the component, scroll down to rendering and visible. You can turn him off. Whoops. And you won't be able to see him. Of course, in the other hitbox episodes we've done, you can tell that we have done the is visible for the other hitboxes, so you could do the same thing for the Hurtbox, which is not hard at all. But if you want to be able to see him all the time, you can just set this to true for debugging, or if you're doing a practice mode or something in your game, then you can go ahead and just set that to true for that mode. Simple enough, right? And then here are my collision presets. I didn't change them, but it might be worth looking at them, because a lot of times when there's an issue with collision, it's in here. Sometimes Unreal will randomly change your values, and it won't be overlap all. It'll be like overlap all dynamic, and it just won't work with what you're doing. It's kind of just an Unreal bug, but I've seen it pop up a few times, so make sure everything here is right if you're having issues. Alright, so that's the ANMBP. That is the hitbox actor, the Hurtbox actor, the hitbox actor, the mutant character, and the default game mode. Did not change anything with, but you can see that we set player 2. That's important. And there's our Hurtbox actor. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for this episode. But now you should have functioning collision that actually works off of a Hurtbox and or an actual player model, as opposed to some weirdness with it happens to be big enough to intersect with your own Hurtbox, or has to be player 1, or has to be player 2, or any of that stuff. It's just flat out going to work at this point. So, in the next episode, we will be going over making these players, like these characters, go left and right only. So you won't have this weird jitter where you kind of rotate or you don't, and you won't have the mannequin example here where you are literally like rotating and can face the camera. You're just going to be facing right, or you're going to be facing left. That'll be in the next episode of the fighting game tutorial. I think that's a pretty important one. And then after that, we will be getting into actually controlling 2 players, I believe. Should be probably one of the next steps. That way we can start testing with multiple people playing the game. Alright guys, so anyway, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching this video. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you for hanging in there. I know this was a pretty long one. It's basically a half an hour, but hopefully that helps you understand hitboxes, Hurtboxes, collision, all that a lot better than when you clicked on this video. I just want to give a huge shout out to particularly Robert and Everglades and all you people who are coming from the YouTube channel and supporting us on things like Twitch and the Discord. That means so much to me. I appreciate you coming by. So, yeah, if anyone's interested in giving us some support, showing us some love in the Twitch, we've been streaming some Apex Legends, some Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. I've been doing some Doom Eternal on my own. Even did some Minecraft and some Bleeding Edge recently. So if you're interested in looking at any of that, come and hang out with me outside of just YouTube tutorials, then feel free to come join the community. And the Discord is amazing. We have 50 members now, and we got people showing their game updates. We have actually a few contests going on right now, and we keep you up to date on some news and some of the programming videos that are coming out. So if you have any issues with this episode or any of the other episodes, or just want to recommend a video or a topic to cover, then that's a great place to do it. So you can find the link in the description. I will put the link in the description for both the Discord and Twitch. But that's all, guys. So thank you so much for watching this video. If it helped you, please, please, please subscribe. It helps me more than anything else you can do. Literally anything else you can do on YouTube. YouTube doesn't care about much more other than that, to be completely honest, that and watch hours. So if I'm being completely transparent with you, subscribing helps a lot, and it just lets me know that you're interested in this type of video and that you want to see more, which helps me tailor this more to actually being able to make videos that you guys are interested in. So, hope you enjoyed. Let me know any feedback you got. I'm Shawnthebro. I'll see you in the next one, guys.